Good afternoon, this is Bob Iaccino coming to you from the CME Group trading floor in Chicago, talking about Mexican peso. 53.52 on the Mexican peso. The peso is recovering very well, up a half a percentage point. Recovering very well, as I mentioned, from the NAFTA fall. Now, there was a preliminary NAFTA fall that happened last year in about August, and then a secondary dip after President Trump became very serious in his dialogue about dropping NAFTA, which he kind of legally can't do because there are actually NAFTA legislation in place that he could not repeal. Even if he said we're pulling out of NAFTA, the legislation would still stay in place. But we are getting a good recovery from the move that started in April at about 55.22 down to about 46.97. So far, in the negotiations to keep NAFTA in place, in theory, an auto deal seems pretty likely. There's talk of a deal covering cross-border automotive trade, which would not only be entire vehicles built in factories in the relative countries, but also in auto parts which come from other countries, pass through Mexico, pass through Canada into the US and vice versa. That is almost ironed out, of course, according to sources associated with the negotiations, as well as the former ambassador from Mexico to the US. It seems like that deal may be put in place, and that seems to be a real key to getting some of the other things ironed out between the three countries. Now, this particular auto deal is being talked about between the US and Mexico primarily, but Mexico and Canada have been very committed to a trilateral deal, and the US is supposedly, according to sources, not against the trilateral deal, which again would fall under NAFTA. So it seems like we may be getting closer, and we could get an announcement next week that some of these things were ironed out. There's still be other things that need to be taken into consideration, like sunset clauses that the US wants, that Canada and Mexico both say are non-starters. So, but the auto deal is really the biggest roadblock they have, and it seems like it's getting closer and closer, contributing to this rally in the peso. And then again, as I mentioned, we're having a technical recovery in price. The peso has recovered about 75%, actually more than 75% of that move down from April, which I mentioned was about 55.22 all the way down to about 46.97 in the SEP futures contract. We have a huge gap from much higher levels, and that would be a long trek to recover all of that. But once you get into the gap, technically, that would be a pretty big step toward closing it, obviously. You can't close the gap without getting into it first, and you'd have to recover most of the move I just mentioned. But getting above a 75% level of that gap actually matters a lot, because a close generally puts about a 68% probability that the entire move would be filled in retracement theory. So a technical recovery happening in the peso, peso recovery well underway. This is Bob Iaccino talking Mexican peso futures from the CME Group trading floor in Chicago.